Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Metroid Prime Remastered. We're still in cleanup mode. Anyone got any sweet tangents we can discuss?
Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
Alright, so we're all familiar with the PS2, right?
I might
Yes.
have heard of it. So it's a niche console.
Ah.
It's a little obscure, but you can go on.
So, do we all know how PlayStation 1 was achieved on it?
Didn't they just put a PS1 inside the PS2?
Most of the PS1 is on the PS2. The only bit missing is the geometry transformation engine and the GPU.
Gotcha.
But on PS2 software, you can use the PS1 CPU for managing I/O. So, all external media, anything coming in and off the disk, it all has to run through that, and 8-bit DMA engine, if I remember. Well, with the Slims, after the first revision Slims, they changed it, because they stopped making the PS1 CPUs.
Huh.
It's more expensive to make than it was to sell, so they scrapped it for something called Deckard, which is a PowerPC CPU, and not many people have actually bothered to look into it. I just found some documentation on it. Yeah, it's somehow stronger than the rest of the PS2 itself.
So like games will run better on the Slim than they will on the original PS2.
Only by a tiny amount, but the thing is the replacement is a PowerPC chip, which is a completely different architecture to the PS1. And it's running at about 440 megahertz, and it's roughly close to the same family as the GameCube CPU.
Huh.
That's a GameCube is 750, and this is a which revision is it? It's a 440, so pretty close. And it's running at like 440 megahertz, and its only job is to emulate the PS1 CPU. That's all it does. Wasted potential.
That is very funny. That's like, taking a weapons grade flamethrower to start your backyard grill kind of energy.
It's like attaching a V8 engine to a food blender.
Listen, sometimes you really want to hear the
But the thing is with Deckard, though, is the emulation code wasn't perfect, so that didn't just affect PS1 games, it did PS2 as well. And so decent compatibility is. It'll vary from game to game because every PS2 game ships with what we call an IOP image. And those images dictate how you can access different parts of the PS2 hardware. Everything has to include it. Certain games don't have the best ones, like, what's a classic example? Klonoa 2. Fun game, right? The IOP image in that game, it's a mess. It can break on the Slims. It can just lose all import. It can even lose memory card access.
Huh.
Because that all
That's
has to run through.
It's interesting how different versions of hardware required that kind of thing. And it only gets more and more technical as stuff goes on. I remember reading that pretty much every Switch 1 game had to be tested on Switch 2 to make sure it was compatible due to the way that
Hardware
the Switch,
and software changes, because the way they're doing backwards compatibility on the Switch 2 isn't like just include the Switch 1 hardware. That's not how ARM architecture works, so I can't take code from like a GBA game and just expect it to run it on the Switch natively. That's not how the ARM architecture works. ARM is generally not backwards compatible. So what you have to do instead is like a virtualization layer.
Oof.
And the virtualization layer is responsible for running the older software.
It has resulted in some really cool things, though, in that a bunch of Switch games now run better on Switch 2 than they do on Switch 1. To the
The
point
alternate
where
costumes in Smash Brothers finally load in a reasonable amount of time.
Probably
I know
because faster accesses to data, and because you're virtualizing, you can scale your quote-unquote internal Switch 1. It's similar to how the PS5 does PS4 backwards compatibility.
So what's funny with Smash Brothers in particular is if you're playing in classic mode, the game loads so fast that you only see the versus Donkey Kong screen for a couple of frames and then it goes away. So it's like you check your phone. It's like, oh, who was I fighting? Oh shit! And then you're in the middle of a
oh shit! Here comes Sephiroth with the steel chair.
No, that's Aerith with a steel chair.
Xbox does it a little different. They will do what we call static recompilations. So they'll recompile the CPU code from the final binary and then ship that out as a digital version.
And
so
what
the
is
game's
that?
basically been pre-made to run semi-natively on the hardware it targets. That's how Xbox 360 and Xbox One's done. I suppose original Xbox to an extent, but that's just a subset of the emulator they embedded in the 360.
I know that's why for a while there was only like a pre-select like backwards compatibility list for the Xbox One. I think it was.
Yeah, because it was just starting out.
Yeah.
So they only had access to whatever code they had the rights to. So that was like first party stuff, maybe some third parties, and then as they got more experienced.
There is that, and there's also, if they don't draw a line in the sand to denote compatibility where they've tested it, consumers get pissy about it. Like, if you say, this system plays games from the original Xbox and the Xbox 360, well, what if one consumer has a game that isn't compatible or has compatibility issues, as happened a few times on the Xbox 360.
Yeah, but that's going from x86 to PowerPC. That is a difficult fucking job to do, even on a good day.
Yeah, like, the more technologically advanced we become, the more difficult and less feasible it is for the old method of just include the old console in the new console is. Because that's basically...
It's financially viable anymore.
Yeah, no. Like, it's like, I think that's like how the DS did it, the Game Boy Advance.
In the DS's case, it is literally the entire GBA hardware is present because the DS actively uses it. It just reduces the parts.
If I remember correctly, the GBA hardware is still even in the 3DS, which is...
Yep, it goes mostly unused there, only for DS backwards compatibility, and a mostly unused, fully compatible Game Boy Advance backwards compatibility. They released 10 games, but I've poked through the files myself. That thing is 100% compatible.
Yeah, no, I've seen people like put custom ROMs on their 3DS
you can.
for and it just works.
It'll just work.
And not even in the Bethesda sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, get fucked on, Howard.
Yeah. So it's as we get closer, like the cost to have, like, let's just use the Switch 2 because it's new. Like, the Switch 2 is already ludicrously expensive. If you added a full Switch 1 architecture in there, that's got to add at least a couple $100. Maybe like, let's say $100 to be generous.
I mean, in these cases now, most consoles are just running on what's called an ASIC or a SoC, so the entire base hardware is running inside a single die package. It's not like a backwards compatible PS3 where it's like, here's all the PS3 hardware. Now, off to the side is the PS2 CPU and GPU. Can you access that? No.
Yeah, it's...
Or the PS Vita where half of a PSP is in there.
Half a PSP?
Yeah, it's got the Allegric CPU and it's got the graphics engine, but it's missing the media engine. And the media engine is basically a second main CPU, but it was mainly handled for, like, decoding tasks for audio or video files.
So, I had a point. What was my point? Alright, so, like, Lewis mentioned that, they have to have a specific list of games, otherwise consumers will get upset. And it's like, yeah, so I think we're getting to the point where we're not going to see systems advertised as, backwards compatible with Xbox Series X anymore. It's going to be like, select Xbox games playable on your new Xbox is
the now we get the spreader.
Yeah, is the language we're probably going to see.
Yeah.
As it'll vary from hardware to hardware as hardware evolves.
It's always going to be easier to remain compatible with the previous generation than it is to remain compatible with all of the generations, though.
Yeah, like that goes, like, would we still be reasonably expecting like Wii U games to be compatible with the Switch, even, regardless, Switch 2, even regardless of the fact that the physical media cannot fit within the console. Like,
again, it's architecture is completely different. The two might as well be speaking two different languages. In the Wii U's case, the best way to describe that under the hood is we have an Xbox 360 at home, and I wish I was joking.
It is sad that, like, I know that Nintendo hasn't really been on the cutting edge of performance since
GameCube, really.
Yeah, I mean, even still, like the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era is like it's weird to me to like as someone who's fairly tech illiterate. Like I know that the PS2 is the weakest of the three, but my understanding is that the GameCube and the Xbox are good at different stuff.
So each of the consoles in the 6th generation specialize at different points. So Dreamcast, you have a shit ton of video RAM, and it's over-engineered to do transparency, because they were still a little sore. You had to do a lot of tricks to do it on the Saturn. PS2 has the vector units. Those things are like the bread and butter for PS2 coding. It's also why PS2 emulation is an absolute bastard. Because when it came to that designing, it's not... what's it? IEEE spec. So it's not like following any international standards, and it doesn't even follow like a conventional computer design. It doesn't go like A is A. It's like A could be C, but only if it equals to F or G. Kind of nonsense. It's like everyone went one direction, and the PS2 just went, nah, fuck you, I'm going the other way. But it could do a lot with careful programming. The GameCube has the texture environment units, and the original Xbox has a fully programmable shader system. It was the first main console to have that.
Yeah, so it's like it is interesting that like yeah, because Nintendo specifically, like they once the Wii came out, they kind of were just like, well, we're just gonna do other stuff.
They were planning a new Nintendo GameCube HD. We know this thanks to the GigaLeak files, but it didn't get very far.
Yeah, I mean, I think considering that the GameCube itself underperformed, like trying to do a revision model just doesn't make an awful lot of sense.
I mean, if you're talking about GameCube revisions, there was only 3 of them, compared to like double digits for PS2 and like 6 for the original Xbox.
I think from that generation, the only console that could output in progressive HD was the Xbox.
In progressive? The PS2
in progressive scan through the component output.
Yeah, PS2 could do that. It could do 720p.
The only thing I ever got from PS2 was interlaced. Ugh.
Yeah, everyone hates 480i on PS2, but it's literally what it's designed for. You need hardware mods or soft mods to work around it, and the soft mods aren't universally compatible.
Yeah.
But you can technically force a PS2 game to run 720p or 1080i. And in 1080i's case, it's sort of doing like a field rendering of doing 2 480p images, and interchanging which one is on the screen at all times. The only downside is that's locked to 30. You're not getting 60 on there.
Yeah.
That sounds similar to me, the trick that they used to get the 3D to work on the 3DS, where technically each 3DS game is rendering its image twice at slightly different video angles.
It's 2 store frame buffers.
Yeah.
It's effectively doing a screen version of that thing you do with VR goggles on your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, the GameCube does still have some leftover GPU calls to do stereoscopic 3D like that, but they go completely unused. The only game that supports them in some capacity is Luigi's Poopy Bachelor Pad.
Yeah. I know that was like, it was something they scrapped fairly early because you would have needed to put a thingy over the screen in order for it to like properly display without glasses, and
the only way they would have been able to get the speed on that without clogging up the rest of the GameCube would have probably been High Speed Port 2. And then most people go, oh, what about the unused serial port too? That's on the Exy bus. And so from the GameCube's perspective, SB2 was just a glorified third memory card slot.
So I think there's like an even more pressing like practical reason why they couldn't do that is because if you have to have like a physical thing you have to put over your TV screen in order for the 3D effect to even work, right? Like everybody's TV, especially in the CRT days, was a different size. Yeah, so like, and I'm not talking like, oh, you know, you'd have to make like a 36-inch or a 40-inch. I mean, like, no, like each one was shaped and sized completely differently, and there is no way in hell you can manufacture that many different sizes of 3D stereoscopic screen
3D.
cover thingamahoozits.
I think the original plan was to have like a small screen that attached to the console and you did it through that. But in testing, it just wasn't financially viable and the tech wasn't there yet.
Yeah. I mean, it is cool that like eventually we did get a 3DS Luigi's Mansion, so like we can see what it would have looked like. But yeah, it's just one of those like GameCube fun facts that's neat to throw out at parties if you're at a party full of nerds.
Oh, so like right now then?
Yeah.
Yes, right now, exactly. And we can talk more about that kind of stuff in the next part of Metroid Prime. So see you guys all then. Later.